From November 30 to December 2, the 28th Conference of the Parties, COP28, of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFOC, was held in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. As a Master of Engineering and a PhD in Economics from Tongji University, I am a serial entrepreneur in the construction industry and urban digitalization field. When studying the calculation of carbon emissions of building projects, I crossed over to the study of carbon-neutral economic theory and top-level policy making. Pretty fortunately, our research team quickly made major breakthroughs in theory and solutions, and published the book New Public Goods Theory and Global Carbon-Neutral Solutions just prior to the occasion of COP28, which showcases our research results. At the end of November this year, I led 3 people from Cowin Research Institute to attend the largest summit on global climate change for the first time. Urgency and helplessness are the biggest feelings when participating in the COP meeting for the first time. First, there are too many slogans and few actions. 2023 will be the hottest year in the world and the year that produces the most carbon emissions from fossil energy. This is the 28th COP, which has set a record of 100,000 attendees. It can be said to be the conference with the largest carbon emissions in the world. However, compared with the 1.5-degree target and the time window left by the Earth for human beings, the progress in decarbonization achieved in the past 20 years is far from enough. The slogan of this session is Unity, Action, Implementation. This state and rhythm are pessimistic as the international community still needs to emphasize this theme in the 28th session. The first global stocktaking also confirmed this conclusion. The global stocktake believes that with the full implementation of the latest nationally determined contributions, the global temperature rise will be between 2.1 to 2.8 degrees Celsius. If all NDCs are fully implemented, greenhouse gas emission levels are expected to fall by only 5.3% in 2030 compared with 2000 now. And even achieving this goal will require increased financial resources, technical cooperation, and capacity building support. The second feeling is that there are many problems and challenges but few solutions. At this COP conference, everyone raised many issues in the process of carbon emission reduction. The credibility of carbon credits, sources of loss and damage funds, stopping or reducing the use of fossil energy, etc., but few practical solutions were proposed. At the opening of this COP conference, pledges for the loss and damage fund of more than USD 300 million were received, eventually reaching USD 790 million, becoming one of the biggest achievements of this COP conference. But USD 790 million is just a drop in the bucket compared to the annual demand of USD 100 billion. The establishment of the fund was confirmed at the 27th COP, and the custody unit and the pledge of 790 million funds were clarified at the 28th COP. Core issues such as the management committee of the fund and the use and distribution of the fund have yet to be resolved at the 29th and 30th COP meetings. At such a speed compared with the rate of global warming, it is far from enough. In the establishing of the carbon market, the issue of the credibility of carbon credits is still raised. On a global scale, the accounting of carbon footprints and the credibility of carbon credit data have seriously hindered the development of the carbon market. This is obviously a problem with the top-level policy making, and none more of appeals and technological innovation can solve the problem of underlying logic errors. The third feeling is that China is under tremendous pressure. As the world's largest carbon emitter, producing 1/3 of the world's carbon emissions, China's fossil fuels contribute about 1/4 of the world's carbon emissions. It is understandable that China is under pressure at the COP conference. The number of domestic representatives participating in the COP conference with 100,000 people is still relatively small, and in the green zone, the overall participation rate of Chinese enterprises is not high. China's right to speak on carbon emissions is completely out of proportion to the country's political power, economic strength, and total emissions. Under the existing carbon emission solutions and the inevitable requirements of macroeconomic development, China is limited in what it can promise. It is an unavoidable presence in every COP conference forum. At the same time, it is the country that is mentioned the most and attracts the most attention. However, when it comes to solving climate problems and achieving carbon emission reductions, it has always been the planned economic model that takes the lead in Western developed countries. The carbon tax and carbon emission quota allocation that have been in place for 20 years is a planned economy model. The development of new energy industries, from photovoltaics and wind power to new energy vehicles, and large-scale financial subsidies have caused a serious burden on the national treasury. Attempts to distribute the quota of 100 billion damage and loss fund is also an example of the planned economy model. Fourth, the contradiction between various national gains and a community with a shared future for mankind. As a cross-time and space, ultra-large-scale and ultra-complex system, carbon emissions are the largest public goods. Solving the problem of carbon emission reduction requires global collaboration. But in the face of the urgent climate change crisis, solving the problem is still rife with national competition. The European CBM, which implements a unilateral mechanism, has been enacted and will be implemented in 2026. The Climate Club, led by Germany and other 36 member countries, also announced its establishment at the COP28 meeting, where the issue of carbon border regulation has not yet been raised, but is expected. Carbon has already become a tool for international trade barriers. Carbon tariffs will become an unstoppable trend. In addition to opposing unilateralism, it is more important for China to speed up the design of response measures. This time we also participated in a forum on geopolitics and climate change collaboration. It was highlighted that 2024 will be the largest election year in the world. The election of leaders and regime change in more than 40 countries regions with voters accounting for 41% of the world's total population and 42% of GDP will form a new global governance structure with consensus and actions to address climate change. The United States withdrew from the Paris Agreement when Trump came to. Trump will be still very vocal in 2024. The mission is on our shoulders and there is a long way to go. This is another strong experience I gained from participating in this conference. The climate problem poses such a great threat to mankind and puts such severe pressure on China. The international community, especially China, urgently needs to find a more efficient path to carbon neutrality. Fortunately, the Cowin Institute team led by me has found the password to efficiently achieve global carbon neutrality. CELM, a new carbon emission responsibility mechanism proposed by Cowin Institute, perfectly solves the three core issues of global carbon neutrality: who bears it, how much to bear, and how to bear, thereby solving almost all the problems in the process of global carbon neutrality. Who is responsible? The production responsibility system dominated by Europe and the United States should be transformed into a consumer responsibility system. Whoever consumes should be accountable. The back end of the industrial chain has the overall liability for the front-end carbon emissions. How much to bear? The principle is that organizations with carbon emissions levels above the industry average should immediately assume liability for carbon emissions. With reference to my country's value-added tax system, a national carbon invoice management system can be established to record the carbon liability invoice data in each transaction. The difference between the upstream input carbon invoice received and the output carbon invoice issued to the downstream is the amount of carbon emissions liability that the organization should be borne. The specific amount of carbon emission liability is not measured manually but is the result of a negotiation game between the two parties. It is fully market-oriented and simplified, but the total amount of carbon sources remains unchanged, and there will be no carbon leakage or double counting. How to bear? Build a carbon-negative carbon market, and you can purchase negative carbon from the negative carbon market to offset carbon emission liabilities. Negative carbon means absorbing a certain amount of carbon dioxide from space. On one side, carbon is emitted, whereas on the other side, carbon is absorbed, and carbon neutrality will be achieved. The global carbon neutral solution based on CELM makes decarbonization truly the best starting point for high-quality economic development in each country. Decarbonization therefore becomes a conscious action for every country, and is no longer a push-and-pull hot potato. The proposal of CELM theory has provided the international community with a new highlight. Starting from the three basic principles of the CELM theory, most of the current problems facing global climate change can be easily solved. Not only can it accelerate the process of carbon neutrality, promote economic growth, and increase social welfare, but lower cost, combine fairness and efficiency, and facilitate international coordination easier as well. The CELM theory has comprehensively innovated the system design of global climate governance and domestic carbon neutrality, and is expected to form a unified solution for global climate governance. The publication of our new book has been recognized by industry experts, and has the opportunity to become a Chinese theory and a Chinese solution, making China's contribution to achieving global carbon neutrality and achieving the 1.5-degree goal under the Paris Agreement. The new carbon emissions liability mechanism, CELM, can allow us to more calmly respond to various international and domestic challenges in the current carbon neutrality process, achieve the temperature control goals proposed by the IPCC, and also allow China to shift from being passive on climate issues to proactive to take the initiative and make greater contributions to solving global climate crisis.